Hello, and welcome to another episode of Not Fake News. Our story this time comes from the USA Today from reporter Crystal Hayes on September 11th, 2018. The headline reads, Trump administration took nearly $10 million from FEMA's budget to support ICE, documents show. The Trump administration took nearly $10 million from the Federal Emergency Management Agency's budget this summer to help boost U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, according to budget documents shared with USA Today. The revelation, just ahead of Hurricane Florence's expected landfall in North and South Carolina, was found by Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat Oregon, who first shared the documents live on MSNBC late Tuesday. He told USA Today that after the devastation of last year's storms, including Hurricanes Maria, Harvey, and Irma, FEMA should have the funds it needs to be prepared for another disastrous hurricane season. It's almost guaranteed to happen again, so this is just incredibly irresponsible, Merkley said. The budgeting document, entitled Department of Homeland Security Fiscal Year 2018 Transfer and Reprogramming Notifications, lists $9,755,303 taken from FEMA's budget, about 9% of the agency's overall budget, and given to support ICE. Money was also taken from other agencies, including millions from the Transportation Security Administration and the U.S. Coast Guard to help ICE, the document shows. The document lists the additional money was taken to help ICE detain immigrants along the southern border, fund beds in detention centers, and remove undocumented immigrants from the country. Quote, ICE must have sufficient detention bed capacity to detain illegal aliens when necessary as it enforces the nation's immigration laws as fairly and effectively as possible, the budget document states. Ensuring adequate funding for the detention beds requires projecting an average daily population, or ADP, for adult detainees, as well as the daily costs incurred in keeping a detainee in custody. The nearly $10 million was taken from various places within FEMA, including training, preparedness and protection, and response and recovery operations. Tylette Holton, a spokesman for the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees both agencies, dismissed criticism of the document as, quote, a sorry attempt to push a false agenda, and said none of the money transferred came from disaster relief funding. Quote, under no circumstances was any disaster relief funding transferred from FEMA to immigration enforcement efforts. This is a sorry attempt to push a false agenda at a time when the administration is focused on assisting millions on the East Coast facing a catastrophic disaster, he said in a tweet. The money in question, transferred to ICE from FEMA's routine operating expenses, could not have been used for hurricane response due to the appropriation limitations. Merkley said he was made aware of FEMA's budget cuts while looking into a solution for family separation and the detention centers set up along the border. He said the document makes it clear ICE is using money from FEMA, quote, to build more detention centers. Merkley said he believes the budget reallocation happened in response to the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, which was rolled out earlier this year. The policy led to thousands of families being separated and housed in detention centers, which he says may have increased the need for more money in ICE's budget. Both FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security did not immediately respond to requests from USA Today. And on this same subject matter, we have another article, this one published in the Washington Post, entitled Trump Administration Considers Using Coast Guard Money to Pay for Border Enforcement. Most of the reallocated funds from the Coast Guard and possibly the Coast Guard Reserve would go to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, by Dan Lamoth, again as published in the Washington Post. The Trump administration, facing a growing immigration enforcement mission on the southern U.S. border, is considering a plan to shift money from the U.S. Coast Guard to other parts of the Department of Homeland Security, according to U.S. officials and an internal Coast Guard message obtained by the Washington Post. Most of the funding would go to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, which is also part of Homeland Security. The department has the authority to move money around between its components and may also shift funding to pay for ICE operations. The Coast Guard message stated that $77 million could be shifted, and that several courses of action have been presented to Admiral Carl Schultz, the Coast Guard Commandant. The Coast Guard reserves also, quote, may also be required to provide a contribution, unquote, the message said. Coast Guard officials, asked to comment on the message, referred questions to DHS. Quote, the Coast Guard doesn't discuss any of our internal deliberative processes, said Alana Miller, a service spokeswoman. Additionally, any potential budget conversations would be pre-decisional in nature. And that's all for this episode of Not Fake News. Thank you very much for watching.